So what would be typically the preparation step before a sprint? Because the sprint you have the 5 days, but I've realized sometimes when doing some session, you realize if you don't help select them the right team, you could have people who are not experts. So what would be the key steps that you do to ensure that the sprint after the 5 days are successful?
Yeah, so the key steps before the sprint, I have an answer that may not be quite sufficient for all situations. So for me, it's you nailed the most important thing, getting the right people in the room. And when I was working at GV, I was going sort of from project to project to project and had the luxury of working with them as their investor. So I didn't need to, I didn't have to convince them to pay me money because it was free to them. I mean, in fact, we were paying them because we invested in their company. But I did want to make sure that when I got there, it was going to be a good sprint. And the key is to have the people who have the expertise, to have the decider. And you can almost start with the decider. If the decider's not going to be involved, we're not going to do the sprint. And then really, if you have the right people in the room, there's not a burden of doing a ton of upfront work because they're going to be able to tell me the information and tell each other the information they need to solve the problem. However, it is important to ask a few kind of key questions. One is, what's the path for this project to launch? Like, is this thing actually set up where we can immediately after the sprint start making progress on it? Is there a team who's ready to go? I want to know that's the case. I want to know if we've already done some research on the customers. I want to make sure that somebody can explain that in the room. I want to make sure that if there has been some thinking about how to solve this, that we can bring that in and look at it, because maybe that's what we want to test. We don't have to come up with something new. So there's some things like that, and even just like, I want to make sure we have a room for the whole week and we have the right supplies. That stuff is actually super important, and often it can cause big problems if that doesn't happen. Do you have some things that you guys do that?
Yeah, maybe I can build on that. We are an agency and we run sprints with a lot of sprints. They are quite first timers. They have never run sprints, so we need to. Kind of 2-3 weeks before the sprint, we have that meeting, that interview, and we have a checklist basically that we fill in with the decider or with the project manager who organizes the sprint. One key thing is to have a decider and to really note down who is the decider. It's not something that should be decided on the spot, like the first day of the sprint. You need to have your decider before. And yeah, we have this kind of kind of blanks. It's like who is the team, and we have 8 lines max, and it's 8 people max are part of the sprint. We don't want sprints with 25 people. We don't want sprints with 4 people. So I think the right number, the right who are the people is super important. Decider, we ask for the long-term goal. What is the goal basically of that sprint? We think it's important to have something already that's coined. And we don't over-prepare the sprint. I think that's something very important. You can find on the internet there is a lot of workshop, sprints before the sprint or problem framing or all these things. We don't really do that. We don't do a sprint before the sprint or a workshop before the sprint.
Yeah, it's the same here, although I imagine there are circumstances where you might need to do more ahead of time. It's just not, it hasn't been my firsthand experience, and it sounds like it hasn't been yours either, but it's not to say that it would work in all situations. Yeah.